Hey, Crosspoint College. I hope that by now you're engaging and enjoying your small groups. The last few weeks that we've been talking about heroes of the faith and spiritual disciplines in their lives that were exemplified. This week, we're talking about self-denial. Now, self-denial is one of the spiritual disciplines or rhythms that I think opens the door of opportunity to better our community. For our kids, my wife and I tell them that it's helping others or sharing or allowing your sister to pick the show that we're going to watch tonight or allowing your brother to pick the game that we're going to play. And to them, that is a very big deal. But to us as adults, self-denial can be difficult. Self-denial is a biblical, spiritual discipline that it really is defined as a willingness to forego personal pleasure or undergo personal trial in the pursuit of the increased good of another. As we have been learning about the story of E.M. Bounds, I'm blown away by his self-denial. In the 1860s, during the Civil War, E.M. Bounds enlisted into an army in one of the most unconventional ways and followed men into war. It was there, in the grotesqueness of war, on the front lines of battle, that many chaplains would retreat to their tents. But in one soldier's account, it stated that Bounds would march with the soldiers to the front lines of battle with no weapon and shout the words of Jesus to encourage them as they fought. The last battle that he was in, over 1,450 men died. Men that he had cared for and prayed for. After the Battle of Franklin, he was captured again, and the job that he was assigned to was to help dig a mass grave for the almost 1,500 men who had died in the battle. And that was a vile and unacceptable grave for men. Men who E.M. Bounds knew, men that he knew had purpose and meaning, even though they might not have been on the same side politically that his family had stood for. A year or so after being released from that prison in a trade with the other side, Bounds returned to that same field where the battle took place. I can't imagine that pain that would have been stirred up. He had lived with the memory of his friends and the people that he had ministered to being killed on both sides of a war. Yet on his return to Franklin, he dug up that mass grave and gave as many as 500 men a proper burial. I like to imagine that as his hands were blistered from digging and the sweat dripped into his eyes, that tears too would have streamed down his face for the men who didn't give their lives to Jesus. But that equally he could have known the joy that some of the men who did, that they knew Jesus and that their Savior was wiping every tear from their eye, and that the King of Glory, Jesus himself, was standing with them now. This is a beautiful picture of self-denial. Bounds gave his time and convenience, even his safety on the front lines of battle with no weapon, for the betterment of others. And even when those men were no more, he put aside comfort to bury 500 of them. And if you know the rest of the story, you know that he moved to the town of Franklin from Missouri and got a house only a few hundred yards from where we are right now, here in Nashville, to help tend to the families of the men who died. This is self-denial, the willingness to forego pleasures or undergo personal trial in the pursuit of the increased good of another. Now, no one embodies this better than Jesus himself. When I think about Jesus acting out self-denial, I think of him in the garden the night that he was arrested. He knew what was coming. He knew that the plan was to kill him. He knew that he would have to die. Yet in the garden that night, while his closest friends were falling asleep when he had asked them to pray, and his other friend was selling him for pieces of silver, Jesus, fully man, pleaded with God the Father, asking that the cup of suffering would pass from him. Yet he said these words, "Not my will, but yours." In the face of the greatest pain that someone could know, Jesus denied himself the pleasure of comfort to make a way for those who would follow him to be saved from death. Wow. Tonight, let's talk about self-denial and how we can apply that in our own lives.